In this video, I'm going to go over Projection Master. So why would we want to use Projection Master? Well, the reason why you'd want to use it is because it does give you access to a few tools that you otherwise don't have, when you're poly painting. It does definitely open up a bunch of options. So what we're going to first do is we're going to first of all just go ahead and just start working on the eyeball. And in this chapter, I'm actually not going to be painting anything specific. I'm just going to be showing you why and when you'd want to use Projection Master. So I'm just going to go ahead and just select my eyeballs here. I'm going to go into solo, and when I'm going to be working on this, I really don't need two eyes, so I'm just going to go ahead and just select one of the eyes. I'm going to scroll down until I get into geometry. I'm going to go ahead and just delete hidden, and I'm going to subdivide this eyeball so I have a little bit more detail to work with. The reason why I wanted to subdivide this model is because when you're projecting stuff onto your models, you want to make sure that you have a little bit more detail on that model so that you can project more accurately. The more polygons you have, the better the projection will be. That's just the way it is. Now, Projection Master works with both the polypaint and textures. So if I was going to apply a texture to this model, I could also paint using Projection Master. So unlike things like Spotlight, which I haven't gotten to yet, Spotlight only works with polypaint. It does not work with textures, unfortunately. So anyways, with that said, I have my eyeball zoomed in on. I'm going to go ahead and just press Projection Master, and we're going to get a window with a bunch of options. Well, for the most part, when you're texturing, you really don't need shaded or material. For the most part, I'm not saying you never do. I'm just saying for the most part, I just want to work on colors now. And I usually want to have fade on. Not always, but for the most part, I usually do. Now, you can do a few things. You can do double-sided, and what double-sided means is that if I draw on the front of this eyeball right here, it's going to project right through my model, and it's going to project stuff onto the other side. So let's explore that. I'm going to have fade and double-sided turned on for now, and I'm going to drop now. What I'll do first is I'll just go ahead and just draw a line, and maybe a circle. And when I go ahead and just press Projection Master again to pick up this detail that I drew and project it back onto my model, you'll notice a few things. So I'm going to go ahead and just pick up now, and my result has been projected. Now, because of the fact that I had fade on, what it did is it faded out everything along the border so that the pixels on the very outside of this model were not touched. So it does a very nice radial fade from the actual borders. The only part of the texture or paint that I actually painted on that was perfectly solid is anything that's within the middle section of this model. At the same time, if I now rotate around, and I probably should touch somewhere on this model, if I go ahead and just rotate around, you'll notice that that detail also exists here. The reason being is that it painted through the model onto the other side. So that's why it's called double-sided. I'm going to undo that now, and I'm going to explore a little bit more. So let's go back into Projection Master here. And if I go ahead and just turn off double-sided and turn off fade, and I try to do the same thing here now, and I go back into Projection Master, and I go pick up. Now you'll notice that first off, the result has not been faded. It's perfect. It's exactly as I drew it, and it's always solid. Of course, the reason is because it drew it all the way up until the border of where it could draw, and it stopped right here. Of course, the paint also doesn't exist on the other side anymore because I didn't have double-sided on. Of course, I could have done something else where I could have just chosen Projection Master. I could have chosen double-sided on and no fade. And I could have drawn something like this and projected. What this will give me is it'll give me a result all the way around the model, as you can see. Sometimes it'll break like this. That's okay. I can always just correct it, but that's something that you have to always worry about. Things like this can happen, especially when you're using double-sided or any of the other functions here. So for the most part, when I'm texturing, what I really do is I just go ahead and just go into Projection Master. I just go, I make sure that double is not on. Not always. I sometimes do use it. And fade on as well. And for now, let's just explore colors, and I'll explore these ones in a few seconds. So I'm just going to go to drop now. And again, I'm using the single layer brush and only RGB mode. And you know what, let's change the alpha and increase the focal shift. So one of the reasons why you want to use Projection Master is because you could do things like this. I could just go ahead and just paint a stroke. And if I don't like the positioning of the stroke, what I can do is I can go into move, and I can use this gizmo in a few ways. One of which is if I go ahead and just click on this blue gizmo here, this blue handle, I can move the last stroke that I drew across like this. At the same time, if I click on here, if I click on there, I can constrain my movement. If I click on the teal handle here, I can constrain my movement there. Of course, if I go ahead and just click inside it, what you'll notice is that my brush will actually be deformed and moved along the surface of this model. And as you can see also, my gizmo is also rotating around the surface of this model. Very nifty. So let's go back into draw mode, and let's draw another one. And if I do the same thing again, you'll notice that now it's only manipulating the last drawn stroke. Now we have a few more options where we can go to scale, and I can scale along one axis if I want to, like this, or along this axis, or I can just go ahead and just choose it like that. The other option, of course, we have is to rotate. So I can rotate like that, or like this, or free like this. Now, the other things that you have in Projection Master is, like, if I go back into Projection Master, actually, I'm still in Projection Master. If I go ahead and just change the tool, if I could select that either from here or from the brush menu here. If I go back into here and I select any of these models, I can actually draw them on top of my geometry. And this is actually pretty cool. Now, right now I'm working in a 2.5D viewport. I'm not actually drawing in a 3D viewport right now. It's giving me the illusion that it is. It's aligning all these objects to my surface, but they're still 2D objects. Now, this is actually really cool if you have a bunch of objects drawn in, or sculpted in 3D, and you're working on like a character's armor or anything like that, and you have a bunch of patterns that you want to duplicate around, and you want to project them back onto the armor. You can just, again, you can have like maybe a flower pattern or whatever, and then you can just use that pattern and you can just draw it on top of your model wherever you want. And then if you miss the placement, you can always go into move, and I can very easily move that across the surface like this. Now, when you're done with whatever it is that you're doing, if you go back into Projection Master, there's a few ways that you can project it. You can project only the colors, for example, and what this is going to do is when I project, I'm not going to see any of this shaded data at all. What I'm going to see is I'm just going to project only the colors that are in this model. So if I go ahead and just pick up now, what you'll now see is that it's only gray, because those gears, they only had a color gray, and that is it. If I wanted to have all the shading, what I would have to do is I would have to, first of all, go back into Projection Master. But first of all, I should note that right now I'm back in my 3D view. So let's go back into Projection Master. Let's drop now, and let's draw a few more of these gears. But this time, I'm going to go ahead and just, when I press Projection Master, I'm going to go ahead and just press Shaded. What this will do is it will project that detail, but it will also make sure that when it projects it projects the shading of that model as well. Of course, as you can see, it just projected all that shading, but into the colors of this model. So this is actually really cool and really, really powerful. Especially, again, like I said, when you're doing a character's armor and stuff like that, it's really, really valuable. So let's go back into Projection Master. And this time I'm going to show you guys that that you have a lot more brushes in here. You can, for example, go ahead and just use the fiber brush, like this. Now, when you paint, when you go pick this up, when you go project all this data onto the actual model, all this stuff on the outside will not be shown. So I can go ahead and just press project, and I could either choose color or shaded or, however you want it. And what you'll notice is that when it projects, it'll only project onto the model. All the stuff outside is not there, so it just disappears. Let's go back into Projection Master again, and this time I'm going to turn on deformation and normalized and do something like this. So what I can also do is, if I go ahead and just make sure that my Z intensity is very low, I can go ahead and just paint on this model like this. Let's try to project this now. And of course, it did try to somewhat displace the model, but it didn't really do much of a job. However, if I was going to do something like this, where I was going to go back into Projection Master again, and this time I use one of the poly meshes, whichever one I want, and again I draw it on this model, and then I pick it up again, but this time I have all this on, normalized, and I have all these options on. If I go ahead and just pick up now, you'll notice that it'll actually displace and color that data. So this is exactly where it's useful if you're working on a character's armor. Again, if you want to displace very specific patterns, you can do just that. Now, when you usually project a result like this, you usually might want to clean up, the edges. You might want to, do something like that. Just smooth out the result. But for the most part, I mean, you get to save yourself a lot of time by being able to do this. Now, when you're poly painting, what you can do is you can always use alphas and stuff like that to paint these kind of patterns on there. But if you already have a model that's ready and you just want to, place it and rotate it into a location, and then you want to project, well, that at least you have the option to do that. So that's pretty much what Projection Master does. It allows you to project colors, meshes. It allows you to move stuff around. And it gives you a bunch of other brushes that are just otherwise not accessible within Polypaint. So even though this is a fairly old technology, Projection Master, it still gives you a lot of stuff that you would have otherwise not been able to do. So with Projection Master out of the way, in the next video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to discuss ZAppLink. And this works a little bit differently. It actually relies on Projection Master. They're both kind of linked. ZAppLink is actually mostly, it is a plugin, but it's still very reliant on Projection Master. So when you press this, it makes a document within Photoshop, but it sets up the canvas inside of ZBrush in a very specific way with Projection Master, and then it just, it projects it all back and does its business. So anyways, until the next chapter, cheers. So I'm back for just a short little bit here, but one thing that I've also forgot to mention is that Projection Master is also able to actually paint onto 3D layers for an object. So if I have this eyeball selected and I turn on my layer menu here, if I go ahead and just create a new layer like this, and then I go into Projection Master like that, drop, and then I go ahead and just paint whatever objects I want in here. One thing that you'll notice is that if I press Projection Master, and I'm going to actually turn off Fade for now, once I pick this up, you'll notice that my model detail is sculpted on my mesh like it was previously, but with the added benefit of me being able to now control the intensity of the sculpted detail. The other cool thing is, of course, I can do either inwards or outwards. So this is really cool. And yeah, so that's pretty much the added benefit. Now, you also might have noticed another thing, and that this is actually not very positive, is that colors don't seem to be passing on. So whenever I, use Projection Master to paint any of these details, my colors actually get lost. So you know, the benefit only goes so far. But, you know, needless to say, I mean, it could be useful, again, if you're painting armor or any kind of detail onto like a mechanical object. If you want to use Projection Master for any specific details, you could also use layers and, you know, fade stuff in and out. You know, it'll work just fine. So anyways, with that said, this time, I'm done for this video, and the next one will be mostly focusing on ZAppLink. Cheers.